Hi, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I hope you're learning new things and meeting new people, or maybe reconnecting with other people, and that overall you're enjoying your time at the conference. My name is Helena Brantley, and I work with scholars and publishers and subject experts to promote books. And I do business as Red Pencil Publicity and Marketing. I'm based in Alameda, and I'm also proud to serve on the PPN advisory board. So a small group of us volunteers have been meeting for the better part of the last year, really, to think about and plan this conference. And early on, it became very clear that we could not gather publishing professionals in the Bay Area and not talk about AI. This week, I had a chance to read a few chapters of an important book, a new book, called The AI Revolution in Book Publishing, a concise guide to navigating artificial intelligence for writers and publishers. It's written by Thad McElroy, and it's available now on LeanPub. Thad is based in San Francisco, and I was actually hoping that Thad would moderate this conference, but he's at the IBPA conference in Denver this week. Thad describes himself as an electronic publishing analyst and author. He is also the president of the Future of Publishing, which is one of the most comprehensive resources of information on the present and predicted outcomes of all sectors of the publishing industry. And he's a Publishers Weekly, or PW, contributor. And in addition to being super knowledgeable about publishing and technology, Thad is also a really just kind, lovely human. And he writes about technology in a way that I feel like I can actually understand. I credit Thad with helping me to wrap my own brain around fungible tokens and blockchains when he explained this to a room full of us a couple of years ago at the Page Break conference in San Francisco, which was organized by Peter Brantley, no relation. So there's so much in this new book, I recommend you check it out. And I could have pulled out a lot of things to kind of frame the conversation today. Because I recognize that we all come to this conversation about AI with different feelings and perspectives and experiences. There is also, in my view, a kind of inevitability, though, to this advent of AI in our industry. So here's what Thad writes. Quote, "For authors and publishers who prefer not to be sullied with AI, the news is bad. You're using AI today, and you've been using it for years. Artificial intelligence in different forms has already been integrated into most of the software tools and services we use every day. For an author or an editor to say, quote, 'I don't want AI used on my manuscript,' is, broadly speaking, all but impossible, unless both they and their editors work with typewriters and pencils. They could try saying, 'I don't want generative AI used on their book,' but that's a tough one to slice and dice. Grammar checking software was not originally built on generative AI, although Grammarly has added it as an ingredient to its product, as inevitably all other grammar checkers will as well. Generative AI is at the core of all the marketing software on offer," he writes. So today, though, what we want to do is to ground this conversation about AI in how professionals in publishing are actually using it. Our panelists are working with AI at the very early stages, what we'll call the intermediate stage, and we have a veteran in the mix. After we meet our panelists and hear how they're using AI, I have pulled some statements from AI from all around the country, or all around the industry, rather. I will read them and ask our panelists to comment on them. After we hear from them, we'll open it up for your questions. So please hold on to your questions until the end and after the Q&A. After the Q&A, actually, these panelists will tell you what they're reading, listening, and in some cases watching as it relates to AI. So grab your pencils or your pen or open your note screens for that. So let's meet our panelists. Nisha Barnes works as a people manager in the Human Resources Department at, applause allowed, at Chronicle Books, where she oversees the company's learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. She is a certified HR professional with the Society for Human Resource Management and also holds a certificate as an executive coach. Nisha is a graduate of St. Mary's College of California and has held positions within the fintech, government, and sports industries before joining the world of publishing. Nina Schuyler is an award-winning writer and creative writing teacher at Stanford Continuing Studies, Book Passage, and The Writing Room. Nina also taught for many years at the USF in the MFA program. The Painting, Nina's first novel, was named a best book by the San Francisco Chronicle and nominated for a Northern California Book Award. Her short story collection, In This Ravishing World, which won the W.S. Porter Prize for Short Story Collections and the Prism Prize for Climate Literature, will be published on July 2nd by Regal House Publishing. There are more than 4,000 people on Goodreads.com, myself included, who want to read Nina's 2003 novel, Afterward. One reviewer on Goodreads, and she has copies for sale afterwards, I wanted to mention. One reviewer on Goodreads described Afterward in this way, quote, Nina's blend of literacy, intricacy, and speculative fiction makes this read perfect for fans of Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel or The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. Indie publisher Clash Books has found a gem, she wrote. Nina also wrote a fantastic essay about Afterward titled How a Non-Techie Learned to Write an AI Novel in the Marin Independent Journal. I highly recommend it. It's a really wonderful, gorgeous, really essay. Paco Nathan is managing partner at Derwen Incorporated, a company that uses AI to connect open source communities with enterprise customers. Paco's experience in publishing as a co-author facing common coordination and alignment problems has helped in his work with publishers and other enterprise customers. Paco has 40 years of experience working in the field of AI and was involved in projects at IBM, NASA, Bell Labs, and he currently advises several AI tech startups. Paco is the former director of the Learning Group at O'Reilly Media and the author of Latent Space, a whodunit tale of neo-noir, gore, and messy flip-the-script cli-fi about artificial intelligence, animism, and the strangest of bedfellows. Let's welcome our panelists. So, Nisha, we're going to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at Chronicle Books and how you're using AI?
Yeah, let me just. Oh, let's make sure you're. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Diversity Learning and Development Manager at Chronicle Books. So essentially, I like to say I have tons of different titles that I do there, but I create, design, our learning and development programs at Chronicle Books while fostering diversity, equity, inclusion. So everything I build always make sure that I live and breathe those values as well. So it may range from coaching individuals, it may range from creating content, it may range from identifying trends that we need to make sure we're aware of to make some impactful changes as well. So a lot of work that I do there. And then how I currently use AI, I would say I'm in the exploration phase. So when I initially started thinking about AI, I was like scared of it, right? But like Helena was saying, it's more normalized. It's in every tool that we utilize already. And so how I'm utilizing it in my day-to-day aspect is I do a lot of people trends. So it's very helpful to pull trends and data very easily. So that's something that I use on the day-to-day. Written communication has been very helpful for me as well, making sure I'm communicating in the tone and making sure that my message is coming off as intended. So that's something that I utilize on the day-to-day. Is now built in our company side, our HRIS system. So essentially, I'm able to look at trends for performance management. I can look at trends for our 90-day check-ins. What are folks saying? How are they feeling? And it's very easy to find out certain words that kind of stick out, certain things that we're seeing, so that I'm able to create content that is meaningful for folks, but I'm also able to see what are some things that we can improve upon. So those are some of just my more common uses of it.
Great. And are you using it like on a daily basis, would you say, or just like when you have specific things that you know it can help you with?
Yeah, so it helps me on some of the smaller, more tedious tasks that I have. I would say before we had that system that we have now, everything was in a manual sense. So if I did a survey to essentially say what are some things that we need to improve upon or work on, I would then have to pull all of that information, categorize my own themes, compare it to the outside. Now, when it's built into my system, I'm able to pull it in a way where I could then have certain words that poke out or certain phrases that come out, and then I'm able to utilize it to build content. So I do use it in my day-to-day, even for my emails. I'm someone who wants to make sure my message is coming across correctly. So Grammarly has been very helpful in that sense. I can come off very like direct or short, so sometimes it's easier to add a different tone in there. So I'm connecting with folks as well. And it's also built in like certain PowerPoints, Copilot as well, Microsoft. Even when you are creating maybe a handout that's going to help folks for resources to learn a certain tool, those are things that I use it. So I would say, yes, I'm using them the day-to-day.
And are there any downsides to using it right now that you can see?
Yes. Sorry.
Sure.
I'm going to pull up
Take
my
your
little...
time.
Okay. So I would say one of the advice that I would say for utilizing AI that has been helpful for me is making sure it's not taking place of my human interaction or things that I need to audit. Is something that's very supplemental for me. So when I am pulling certain data trends, it's important for me to then follow up for those data trends. For instance, one of the things that I do, since I'm working with people, is identifying like essentially if there's an area of opportunity within the company that we can work on. Sometimes what the AI tool will take exactly what's written in there, but it doesn't necessarily capture like the feeling or the emotion. So then it then takes me to follow up on to make sure that the information I'm getting is accurate. So I would say it's not a replacement, but it's something that has been helpful for my efficiency. But it still needs that human like audit, because what you're inputting is it could impact what's coming out, and you want to make sure it's correct.
Sure. And I'm curious, can you just explain what are you using? Are you using like ChaptGPT or one of the other options, or are you using something that's been customized for your department?
Yeah, so I use a combination of all those things. So the ChaptGPT is something very useful for like maybe common questions that I have, or some quick finds that I can do. However, within our HRS system, I'm using a tool called Publicity, and it has built in. I find when I'm testing with AI, it's easier to feel that I can trust it when it's built within a company that has a certain like clearance or security, especially when you are working with some private information. So within that system, it's now able to increase like recognition where essentially it can say, for instance, if I want to shout out someone for doing X, Y, and Z, it will then populate, hey, these are the folks that are on your team, or they were able to study this, like maybe you should shout them out for it. So those things can be helpful on the people side. For the learning and development side that I utilize it for, it's able to essentially say, these are the goal sets that folks are working on, and now here are some curated trainings that they can utilize that for. And then for another aspect, such as like onboarding or even offboarding, are the survey pieces. The AI tool has been very helpful in making sure it's automated, so when you all do join like a company, it's an easier process to then make sure you are up to speed with the company that you're working at to make sure you're successful. And then, I would say those are the main ones.
That's helpful.
Yeah.
It sounds like, based on what you said, you're optimistic about how AI is helping and how it can continue to help. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I'm definitely optimistic. I would say it can be a helpful tool if you are essentially being mindful with the how and the way that you're utilizing it. Say, for instance, if you have very like private information, you just want to make sure the tool you're utilizing is a little bit more like protected, or you're not just putting things in somewhere you don't know where it's going. Where I feel like I may like question it would be on the bias side. Just in my mind, if this tool is so big on like what you input in it, and it's coming from folks that we all have our natural like biases, you may then have some of those biases built in. I know I've seen that it's able to be mindful of that, but I think that's something that's always going to be in the back of my mind of making sure I'm careful with that. So that's why I make sure I'm editing the information that I'm getting out of it to make sure it's just giving an extra glance on that.
Sure. No, that's helpful. Thank you. Nina, you are a multiple award-winning writer, and you teach creative writing. Can you summarize for us how you're using AI both as a writer and a teacher?
So I should preface this by I represent a population that is very conflicted about AI, as you can imagine. Most of us are terrorized by it. We think we are soon going to be replaced. So we are not optimistic. I think I'm the one on the panel that has the most trepidation in watching the encroachment on writing itself, because it's good. The thing is, ChaptGPT, that's what I use, is good. So how am I using it? Anything, I don't use it every day, maybe once a week, anything routine. So I'll log on to ChaptGPT and give it a question. Or I'll give it a paragraph. I have to write an essay for a magazine. And usually when you pitch a magazine article, you have to write a short paragraph about what you're going to write. So I'll write it first, put it in ChaptGPT and say, can you improve this in terms of formal tone? Or can you improve it? I guess my prompt yesterday was improve it so someone reading this pitch would be interested in reading or assigning me the article. So up the persuasive quality, and it does it. And then I get the printout, and then I edit it. It's like, this doesn't sound like me. I would never use these adjectives. So it's a back and forth process right now. So anything routine that I am not that doesn't matter too much to me, unlike the creative process really matters to me, the actual creation of a story. So I have friends, I'm going to speak now not just for me, but writer friends, who if you have to write a query letter to someone, then write first the query, then put it in ChaptGPT. It's like, can you put this 5 sentences into 3? Because a query is often 3 sentences. So it's really good at summarizing. And again, you get it spits it out and you edit it. So playing with paragraphs. Like, I don't like this paragraph. Again, a prompt for ChaptGPT. Can you add 5 adjectives? And just to get more openness. Like, I'd never choose that adjective, but I really like the adjective. So maybe I'll include it. So again, improving your writing and stepping out of your comfort zone. So again, it's all, you're going to hear from Paco, it's all in the prompt. Like, remember, if you're playing with it, you can, like, no, that's not it again. Can you try again? So after that first prompt, give it another prompt and stay with it until you get what you want. So a lot of writers, it's like, well, I tried it and it's stupid. And that was one iteration, right? They tried once, and it's like, oh, that was a lousy response. And then they think they're done, right? But you say, no, now try it again and use different adjectives or reformulate. Actually, I want something that's more colloquial sounding, more friendly. Can you try it like that? I have friends that are copywriters, and it's a good first attempt at research. Again, ChaptGPT. Give me, the 10 top suitcases to carry on your vacation. What are the best sellers? So someone just wrote this article. It's like, okay, you could Google it and go through all the sources. What are the top selling suitcases? No, she went to ChaptGPT, put that prompt in, and at least got a first iteration of a list. And then she went into Google and figured out, oh, this is an interesting suitcase. I'll put it on my list. And she, frankly, she doesn't really care that much about that kind of a writing project. It's to make money, right? I want to write this copy. You're a copywriter. You just have to turn out the ad copy. So again, ChaptGPT is really great on summarizing and pitches, I have found. Like Helena had mentioned, it's built now into Grammarly. So if you put your piece, let's say you wrote some essay, and you're just making sure your verbs are right, it now suggests like, hey, do you want to see our AI input, how you could rewrite this sentence? Well, you might want to look at it and then reject it or take a piece of it. I put in a piece, I pitched something to the Atlantic this morning. I put my pitch in there. It's like, let me suggest in paragraph 2. And it's just doing it, right? Now you have no choice. So like you said, it's infused into everything. Grammarly, autocrit. A lot of writers use autocrit. There's a new AI facet to it. I had always argued before, this is always changing. So now autocrit has... Before I said, oh, well, AI is built on patterns, right? It's looking at massive data sets and looking for patterns. It's ingested over 180,000 novels right now, and authors are suing, right? Hey, you took my novel and put it in your data set. And I had argued, well, okay, it doesn't know how to create originality or surprise. Well, now autocrit has something called add surprise.
Wow.
So who knows? This is where we are now. So this is it. It keeps inching up to what the creative writers know how to do well. So that's how I'm using it, how I'm seeing people use it. I had a teacher, I went to a book club the other day. A teacher says, I'm short on time. I tell ChatGPT, let's just call it Chat, to put together a practice sheet on direct objects and indirect objects. It's done in 30 seconds. It's like, okay, I've got something for my 4th graders. So I'm seeing it all over, teaching, copywriting, a little bit in creative writing. But again, we're very, very terrorized and panicky about it.
Yeah. Do you remember the first time, like what it was that prompted you to try AI?
Yeah. So this novel came out in 2023. Someone sent me the beta version of ChaptGPT in 2019. Said, you should, I have a lot of techie friends. Just go play with it and see. And it was really lousy, but they put it out there to try to improve it. And so we were writing, we'd put in 5 words, and it's like, write a poem using these 5 words. And the cool thing is, it was really irrational back then. So you'd get the most wacky poems, like, what is an aardvark doing in the middle of this poem? And that wasn't one of your words. But it opened up the creative process, so you could get these weird, bizarre images connected. It's like, how did it get over here? So you probably remember the New York Times when the journalist was playing around with ChaptGPT and it fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Or was it ChaptGPT or
yeah,
Bing?
I know it was. Mm-hmm.
So it has an irrational quality to it. Well, that's exciting for creative writers because we want to get out of we want to be in the dream landscape. We want to, do something unusual or different. So early iterations of ChaptGPT back in 2019 were really good at that and just being bizarre. And that was fun. So it was just curiosity. And then I started, really getting into it and thinking, you know what, I'm going to write a novel. And it's fascinating that this natural language processing now simulates what a human sounds like. It's not a machine anymore. It just doesn't feel like a machine the way it talks because it's digested so much information. So I remain curious and terrified.
Yeah. I think it was Kevin Roos, the New York Times reporter, who had that that experience, which made for a really interesting episode of The Daily, if you all are interested. What do you want AI to do that it's not able to do yet?
Well, I wanted to back off. Number one. Number two, they call it hallucination. What that is, it makes mistakes. So every bit of research you do, tell me about the medieval century and what did they believe in? Well, it'll give you an answer. It won't say, I don't really know. It'll never answer that. It'll come up with something. So you've all probably heard about the lawyer who did ChaptGPT probably at midnight. He had a brief due the next day and did ChaptGPT. Give me the 3 cases involved in this law. They were all fake. So he had to check it. So I think as a research tool, it could be improved. But, I am voting for collaboration, like Nisha's doing, versus domination. So right now, I wish it would do research better, but that's it. Stop.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah, thank you. So Paco, tell us how you and your teams are working with publishers and other content creators.
Great. Actually, I think there's a lot of points of overlap. One of the areas of my background really is in natural language processing over the years. Also had done a lot of work in neural networks since the 80s. There's a lot of ways that tools can be used, and both to help writing, but also to help reading. So, on the one hand, we do a lot of work where we take just raw text, and from the text, we start to structure it and understand, what are the main themes? What you could think of like generating character sketches, but what we're doing is we're generating what are called knowledge graphs out of raw text sources. And this might seem a little strange. It actually gets used in places like pharma is doing this a lot for drug discovery, taking a lot of scientific documents and then building graphs out of them to see where are the spots we haven't explored yet. I know Novartis and AstraZeneca and others have published a lot of success on that, especially in cancer drugs. So we do that work where you can take raw text, I've got some good demos online, and basically build up a graph describing different scenes or what you're writing about, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. If it's nonfiction, there's some approaches like entity linking, where we can go out and look at resources like Wikidata and link in, you have referenced the following, here's some primary sources to back it up. I guess I would say there's really a couple of divisions in AI. There's more of a symbolic side and more of a statistical side. And the pendulum swings about every 10 years between them. Right now, it's really super high on the statistical side. But the industry applications that really get a lot of traction tend to be hybrid. They tend to use both. And we're seeing that with like hallucinations in LLMs right now. The thing that's coming to the rescue is to take knowledge graphs and do a technique called RAG to ground the answers using symbolic AI techniques. So you end up using both. And so I guess what I'm saying is I've been around the AI space for a long time. I'm not an optimist. I'm more AI dubious. I think one of the problems in our field is that it really takes at least about 7 years to go from the invention of an algorithm to actually having it be proven out in a business that's sustainable.
How many years was that?
About 7.
7.
There have been some pretty good studies about this. One of the latest was just like with Spotify with audiobooks. They struggled forever to try to get audiobooks to be successful at Spotify, but the data, there's like a Pareto ratio, right? So like a small number of people on Spotify listen to all the audiobooks. So how can you recommend if it's only a handful of people? They were able to use a technique that really was invented back in 2017. And it took that time to go from algorithm was published to when there's like a data set that kind of proves the algorithm, usually a few years. And then it takes time for companies to try to hire the people and explore it. But then it takes time for HR to be willing to let them to publish about it. So the irony with Spotify and audiobooks was a company one of our customers is Neo4j out of Stockholm. They had surveyed the industry to find out who's using a graph neural network, an AI technique. And in 2023, they came up with nothing. Even Meta was saying, yeah, we ditched that stuff. And then Spotify turned up the next year publishing, yeah, we've done this successfully, we've been working on it for 2 years. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of new stuff all the time. There's a lag between when it gets invented and when it can be validated and proven by third parties. And so what you're hearing are crests of hype because the pundits will rush in and make a lot of promises. And what we see is just the pendulum keeps swinging back and forth. I do a lot of work where using these kind of tools, also I do a lot of writing, or our team does a lot of writing for customers, and trying to understand how to align across different contributors to maybe make a development editor's life a little bit more sane. That's one area where these kind of tools can really come in, over and beyond, say, like what Grammarly and others are doing.
Right, so you said to help with the development editing. Can you say a little bit more about that? Yeah, certainly. You know, I've been on a lot of co-authoring projects and done a lot of ghostwriting, especially in industry. And usually, you know, you get called in because there's some executive that wants to be a thought leader and make a statement and publish a book, but they don't have the writing chops and they don't have a technical background. So they want people to like develop their content. And usually those projects, it's like, you know, there might be a handful of contributors. When it comes time to take everybody's contribution and weave it together, how do you get a consistent voice? Right.
How do you get consistent definitions? Again, it's back to the editorial part. And can you use some of these tools to try to make that a bit more sane? Because we do a lot of that work at scale already, sort of digesting PDFs, digesting a lot of written for customers. But how can we use it for smaller projects? I think that's probably one.
Got it, okay. You answered a couple of my questions about your concerns with AI and also, you know, just being a pessimist. Maybe you could say more about that.
Sure, yeah.
Your pessimism.
I mean, so there are a couple of things. I think right now, I mean, we're hearing a lot about chatbots. And so chatbots are the current generation is using something called a large language model, usually with some sort of personality module and some other bolt-ons. And then they have this chat interface. This is something that's been around for a long time. But there were some pretty good breakthroughs a few years ago where at least the conversational aspects of it sounded better. But I just want to say that, you know, AI is a practice. This kind of work has been around for a long time. I think the best definition for AI that I have really comes from the Macy conferences, Margaret Mead in like, you know, mid-century, where they were coming up with the definition, usually like teams of people and machines collaborating together. That's one of my favorite definitions for it. Werner Vinge, the science fiction author, of course, was hired by NASA to come up with some of this as well. We can talk about that. My cautionary tale there, the one thing I'd ask people to take away is AI is a practice. It's not a thing. So it doesn't have a pronoun. So please don't say the AI or it or your AI. That doesn't exist. It's a practice. And the problem is that there are deep pockets that would love to have you using the pronouns. And they're kind of nefarious. How many people here have ever heard about work from Emily Torres and Timnit Gebru about the TESCREAL bundle? 0. Okay. So this is what I'm worried about. Okay. The what bundle? TESCREAL. Emily Torres. Okay, so here's the deal. In '94, a math professor out of San Diego State, who's also a famous science fiction author, Werner Vinge, was contracted by NASA to write a report, basically paraphrase the script for Terminator, but backfill with like, you know, scientific references, and draw up 5 scenarios of how we could get to Skynet.
How we can get to
Skynet. Like they were studying AI risk in 1994. So the idea of Terminator is that suddenly the machines become sentient and they rise up. And so this science fiction author got hired by NASA to write this report. And the report talked about something called a technological singularity. And he did show 5 paths toward areas of possible concern in a future scenario. It was very futuristic. Unfortunately, deep-pocketed, can I go ahead and say just like wealthy white guys with libertarian bents in Silicon Valley, heard part of what Werner Vinge said. Actually, they heard the part that he said was the least likely, and they heard it and they said, oh, you're talking about me. Because one of the scenarios was a select elite individuals would become fused with AI superintelligences and become Ubermensch to reign as God kings over the rest. And so people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel were like, well, obviously you're talking about me. because I'm going to be the Ubermensch. We have to get rid of DEI and all these other things that are in our way and just rush as fast as we possibly can get there. And if you go listen to these people, Mark Andreessen, Peter Thiel, I could keep going down the list. Elon Musk is definitely one of them. Sam Altman is another one. This is what they're saying. And there's been the thing that bothers me about it bothers Timnit. Timnit Gebru was the researcher at Stanford who did some critiques about some of the racist aspects of Google search. And then she led the AI ethics team at Google that Google fired all at once for giving them advice that would have saved them $100 billion. So long story short, a lot of the test Grail bundle, a lot of these people are aligned with sort of second wave eugenics. And the idea is we can make better people if we just kind of, and they're also very much aligned with, you know, paying for far-right Senate campaigns. And so test Grail is an acronym that talks about 8 different sort of pseudo-religious sects that are based around this idea of singularity. And so there are literally people around Silicon Valley who are very deep-pocketed, who are pushing a real political agenda, but they're saying, hey, look, let's just rush toward this because then I'll become all-powerful. And unfortunately, you know, when you look at AI right now, there's maybe 6 companies that are allegedly leaders, you know, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, et cetera. And when you look at where the money comes from these companies, they're also the leaders in online marketing. And all of them are also trillion-dollar market cap companies, multi-trillion-dollar. And so what you see, I don't know if you saw the earnings reports from Microsoft and Alphabet yesterday, but what you see is they're using their marketing muscle to claim that they have AI muscle to claim that they have a $1 trillion valuation. And that's a lot of what's driving the current cycle. There really are great applications for language models, and we can go into that, but there's a lot of marketing, and my cautionary tale is just don't use pronouns and don't believe the marketing hype from libertarian tech
Got it.
bros.
Okay, well, thank you. Good to know. So I think now what we'll do, I have one last question for you, which is your work at O'Reilly. Can you just tell us what you did as the director of education for O'Reilly? Because I think many people are familiar with O'Reilly here.
Thank you. Yeah, no, O'Reilly was fun. I was there for a few years. I left about 6 years ago. So I was the director of the learning group, and I had been I'd been director of community evangelism for a startup here in Berkeley called Databricks that really took off. And we were the most popular open source project, Apache Spark, during that period. And we were teaching these tutorials at O'Reilly conferences. There was one conference that had 1,200 people. We had 900 people in our tutorial. I mean, it was kind of appalling in some ways. So the O'Reilly executives noticed that this was a very popular thing. They wanted to bring people in who understood how to reach out and teach and get learning materials out in front of a wider audience. So I came in and I hired a group where everybody had experience as a popular author, as a popular professor, instructor, and also some technology background. And our job was to go out to the different editorial teams and help coach authors doing tutorials, like in the conferences, more, you know, kind of up their game pedagogically, how to make tutorials that were better for the audience. We also had in our portfolio the instructional videos and a lot of the live courses online. So a lot of that was just how can we work alongside development editors and alongside authors and try to get better learning materials.
Got it. Thank you. So now we're going to move into this section where I'm just going to ask the panelists to comment on these comments, these little excerpts that I've found from all across the industry based on their background and their experience. They may agree, they may disagree, or they may just shed light. So I'm going to start with you, Nisha. According to the Academy of Innovate HR, the future... Oh, wait. Sorry. Do I want to do that one? Yeah, let's do that. The future will also bring changes to the HR practitioner's work. As AI removes most of the repetitive operational work, HR will shift its priority to supporting the adoption of AI across the organization and providing more strategic value to the businesses. HR professionals will need to develop new skills to adapt to this change. What do you think about that?
Well, within my trade, particularly, we're always consistently always learning and always staying up to date. Part of being certified with INSHRM, you're required to have so many educational hours. So I do often take a lot of classes within the HR field where a lot of professionals in that space, we get together and we talk about this. I think, yes, it's going to change, but the change so far has been in a positive way, meaning that I am now able to essentially, like with utilizing AI tools, and if your company is fortunate to have like systems that's able to utilize it, I'm then able to see certain like a workforce. I'm able to analyze our workforce a little bit more and understanding certain risk that can then lead to an increased like tenure, or not tenure, but increase attrition. So I can then calculate, okay, what are some things that we can do to make sure that we're increasing like belonging, or we are then checking in on this person because this is some things that may cause someone to leave. And we want to make sure that we are creating and fostering our employees to make sure they're successful within their space and within our company as well. Certain things as your performance like check-ins, before I would say they were a little bit more siloed. Like you may turn it in, you're like, oh, I'm doing great, everything is awesome, and you toss it in a little file and no one sees it till the next session. But now adding it to the system, you're able then to provide trends for years to come. Chronicle Books is pretty fortunate to have a pretty large tenure, so now having that tool, we're able to say like, hey, these are some things that you set up early on, maybe these are things why it particularly may have decrease in your satisfaction within the space. These are some learnings that we can do to help you. These are some things that we can send you on to grow and develop even more. So those things are pretty helpful within our space. But all of these things are something that I like to make sure I am still present. It's not making a decision. So certain things I may be afraid if folks are utilizing AI in a way of like, which you shouldn't be doing, but like say for hiring, fully decisions, like they will then pull like, oh, this is a top candidate, this is important, etc. You shouldn't rely on AI to make those decisions at all. It should still have some human element in those spaces. But it has been very helpful in creating like resources and analyzing like your workforce and the surveys. The number side, very helpful. More so the emotional side, the human side, I'll still have a job. So I'm very like helpful in that. So it's a balance for me.
Nina, in a 2023 Harvard Business Journal article entitled How Generative AI Could Disrupt Creative Work, 3 authors posed the following scenario. Unfair algorithmic competition and inadequate governance leads to the crowding out of authentic human creativity. Here, human writers, producers, and creators are drowned out by a tsunami of algorithmically generated content, with some talent creators even opting out of the market. If that would happen, then an important question that we need to address is, how will we generate new ideas? What do you think about that?
Well, first I want to add to Nisha's comment. I have a junior in college, and you now have to hire an AI bot or something to look at your resume so that the keywords show up as the AI system weeds out resumes. So it's a whole other addition to finding a job as a college person. It's pretty bad. I mean, to even get someone, a human to look at it, you have to get through this guardrail now. So we have to pay money. We had to pay for our son to have his resume go through to make sure the keywords show up. So it's just FYI, if you have a college kid, this is coming up. Like, how do you even get a job anymore to get through? Okay, so moving on to creativity. So like I said, I really hope that we move toward collaboration. So if you look at Amazon right now, there's a whole ballooning of AI-created books, especially children's books. Amazon, fortunately, is now labeling what is AI, what isn't. But who knows if that gets blurry. But at least what needs to happen is transparency so that you as a human being can decide, yes, I'll support a human writer. I choose not to buy a human or a AI-made book. So that is already proliferating, and there's so many more books out there now because of AI-generated books, and especially in the children's book. You can whip out a children's picture book in a day. You know, they're short, right? And they're illustrated. So you just get on DALL-E and get some images and put them in there. So we have to decide as a society, what do we want to do with this very human ability to create? And in that article, the Harvard Business Review article, they called creativity a human masterpiece. So what are we going to do with the human masterpiece? Right now I'm seeing jobs from Silicon Valley, the tech world, San Francisco. The jobs for writers right now are prompt writer.
Wow.
Or you can come help read the output and train our model to write better. Wow. These are for creative writers, my students and me. This is what the jobs are. We don't want you as a writer, we want you to edit, essentially become an editor and just make our prompts better so we get a better output, and then, reinforce it with human learning and teach our AI model how to write better. I know in college, my kids in college, they all use ChaptGPT to write essays. A Stanford professor of mine now knows exactly what is something written by AI versus a human being. So often the AI version is better, it's more organized. So that's interesting to me. But then they go back in, the kids are learning, like you just make some errors now and then and try to camouflage the AI. But so they call it, everyone finds a workaround, right? I have a friend that teaches undergraduate. I know I'm getting way off topic, but I collect these things. So if creative writing is a GE, a general ed requirement, and the kids don't want to be in there, they're writing creative writing. They're writing stories, AI-generated stories, and this professor's just like drowning in sludge right now. So that's going on. But as a society, we have to decide, is this a human ability, a human value that we want to reinforce and keep, the human writer? So I'm going to quote, I think George Saunders said this recently, and he probably misquoted or paraphrased Albert Einstein, who said, "No problem is ever solved within the plane of original conception." So for me, that's our saving grace as a human writer, which is very, very different than the way AI creates. And we're in completely different mindset. We're outside of time. We're not busy, A equals B, move this lever. I need a plot point here. There, it's created like, a can opener. So we're not... The creative process is nothing like that. It just isn't. So we'll have to decide as a society and a culture, do we value this other way to create that is moving not toward just a finished product, but often the truth? What is the truth in this scene, the truth of this story? And you're using fiction and manipulation to get to something other than just, I want a finished product.
Yeah. Paco, the storm clouds surrounding artificial intelligence, both as a technology and as an industry, continue to darken. And I can now imagine a scenario where the AI industry implodes. What the implosion could look like is difficult to visualize, but there would be significant implications for the publishing industry. That's Thad McElroy writing on his blog, which was published in Publishers Weekly. What do you think about that?
I think there's legit concerns there. I think, we have seen periods that we call AI winters, lived through a couple of those, where usually, the phenomena with people and cognitive dissonance in people is that usually the near-term expectations are overinflated, and the long-term reality is something we don't even imagine. And so this really plays out a lot in the industry, where technology will pop up, and pundits will go and grab the headlines, and once there's a consensus with the pundits, then executives go and fund it, and it all works great until the actual practitioners pop up and say, well, that's not really what we're doing, and then reality changes. So I think we're right now in that kind of a thing, which is basically a bubble. But having said that, there's really good applications. And there are applications, I think, that are real game changers in areas where people were really struggling and really need it. Two of my favorites are in what Io was pointing out earlier in climate science. We've done a lot of work with NOAA, but I think the two that I'd point to, Anima Nankumar is at Caltech. She leads a team that's doing weather and climate models, and they've been using latest generation deep learning, using AI models to make climate and weather forecasts so much better, but also so much faster. And so for responding to increasing numbers of Cat 5 storms, having faster models, and I mean 5 orders of magnitude faster. So that's very significant. There's another project I love. It's out of Allen Institute, something called Skylight, where they're taking data from buoys and other ships and various satellites and whatnot, and trying to figure out, like, for the ships that are out at sea, which ones look like they're doing illegal fishing, which ones look like they're doing smuggling. And they're a nonprofit, but this service goes out to more than 60 governments for, like, deploying Coast Guard. And so I think that we're seeing some real tangible response on climate or environmental issues that are a nice windfall out of it. That's not going to go away. Yeah. And the other thing is there's just so much investment right now in hardware. And a little known secret is that really the changes in hardware drive the rest of AI. Hardware and data governance and marketing. Those are the 3 things that drive AI. And we can unpack that. But because of the billions that are being spent on hardware right now, we'll see windfalls. And it won't be for machine learning. It'll be for other things that businesses need to do that right now a mom and pop shop, maybe General Dynamics can afford to do XYZ, but mom and pop plumbing shop can't. We'll see some windfalls out of the hardware. It's really stunning what's happening right now, and looking out over the next 3-4 years, what the hardware price performance will be.
All right, thank you. I think in the interest of time, we should open it up for questions from the audience now. What questions do you all have for the panelists? Sure.
A watermark or something. It's something we should call for. I know the Authors Guild, so the other thing that's been happening is AI generated work is using human author names and essentially camouflaging who did it, right? So Jane Friedman's a big name. She writes about publishing and how to get published and everything. So she couldn't get Amazon to take those fake books off that had her name on it, that were AI made. They were lousy, poorly written, and her name was on it. So she went to the Authors Guild. And then they called Amazon, we're going to sue you if you don't get those books out of your whatever. So, but she had clout. So all of us that, I had someone, I don't know, from the Middle East use my name. And so I couldn't change anything to get. So I had to go through, all these different routes to try to get that book off of Amazon that had my name on it. That I didn't write it. I don't know who wrote it. So there's a lot of machinations going on. I know what the Authors Guild is really on it, and the U.S. Copyright Office is now re-examining the copyright law. Public comment closed October 31st, and I have a friend that works there, and they don't know what to do with it because the copyright law was never used to address AI. Now I should add that the reason the screenwriter, they struck, right? The screenwriters struck, and one reason it settled is they were saying no AI written scripts. Well, under the copyright law, AI written scripts don't have intellectual property. They're valueless. They're not protected. So it was a huge bargaining chip. Like, this is going to be worthless property if you let AI do this. So I'm hoping the Copyright Office, in some way protects writers that say anything AI generated is worthless. You can't sue or whatever. It's like, sorry, there's no value to it. But right now it's all, a mix and a flux, and we haven't figured it out in the law. It's just slow.
Peter?
Follow up a little bit on your remark about anything that's generated by AI is not copyrightable. From the standpoint of what you were talking about previously, the creativity and imagination and maybe idiosyncrasy of prompting to get a particular result that is maybe
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, right now they're trying to settle the law. So a bunch of authors, Michael Chabon is one of them, right? He's in Berkeley. They're suing the big companies that, ChaptGPT and the other companies that have used their work. So it's a copyright infringement lawsuit, and we're all just waiting what happens. But we're also waiting on the U.S. Copyright Office to issue a new law. So I agree with you that, it shouldn't be either or. There's some kind of collaboration model that should be allowed. I know when I submit literary journals, the little literary journals that are out there, now they'll say we accept no AI generated material. Or another literary journal, I've seen this, you have to identify what was AI generated in the work. So again, transparency. So that at least the literary journals are all on this. One literary journal, the science fiction, I forgot the name, it got flooded with AI work and he shut it down. It's like, I'm not taking any more submissions. Like hundreds of AI generated science fiction stories, like, in a week. And he goes, I can't handle this. So we're in this chaotic, undecided time where we're waiting for the law to catch up and these lawsuits to be decided and the Copyright Office to issue something. So we're waiting.
No, you're good.
One consequence, if we turn everything over to AI, is that our ability to think will be minimized. So to write an essay, it takes a lot of, even if it's nonfiction, it takes a lot of thinking. Yeah. There's a logical through line, but you still have to digest and synthesize and walk around the block and reflect, and how is this associated with this? And that's even more in the creative writing world where you're making everything up. So that, so ethics, it's going to come down to one law, but also personal ethics. At some point, I just don't see when you're a creative writer, the magic of it is actually creating. And so if you turn it over to AI, write me a story about a woman who sees a ghost and it tracks her. It's like, well, what? And it writes the story. It's like, well, what satisfaction was that? None. I mean, as far as I can tell, is the kind of writers that I work with, the kind of writers I am with, that the deep pleasure is in that mystery and putting what seems like disparate things together, and somehow they come together. It's almost like a huge, mess in the beginning. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question. Maybe our other panelists have it. But well, you wanted to jump in?
I mean, I definitely think that OpenAI and ChaptGPT is a point in time. There's been a lot of money pumped in to sort of subsidize and make a big splash, but long term, we're not really sure. Microsoft's actually hedging its bets and investing in competitors. And it is a very expensive operation to run. So the odds that ChaptGPT will be a dominant thing later on, I'm not so convinced. In industry, when enterprise groups need to do something with an LLM, more and more they're turning to open source models because the price performance is there. But the other issue is just a major company is not going to turn over all their data to Microsoft. They're just not going to, their shareholders will not allow that. And there's a lot of compliance reasons. It's a lot better in Europe than anywhere else. But what we're seeing is that there's a lot on the corporate side saying, you know, nice demo, but we're not buying it. We're going to do it ourselves, and you're not going to own all of our stuff.
Right.
And I mean, in some ways, that's almost worse because then it's a very balkanized kind of future. But it doesn't mean that there's like one monopole that owns everything, right? I think Microsoft, you can ask me later, we don't have time, but Microsoft did something very shrewd because they were actually about 5th ranked as far as the large AI teams. They were about 5th ranked, and Wall Street doesn't accept that. Wall Street doesn't care about 3rd place. And so it was kind of a gamble, and it paid off, largely because Google leadership lose their minds whenever Microsoft beats them at something. And that has played out in the market brilliantly. So I guess what I'm saying is you'll probably see some larger players, large manufacturing, for instance, come in and say, you know what, here's what we think, and oh, by the way, I think you probably pay attention to us.
I think also at the education level, you know, professors are having to be very creative. Like we're having in-class writing, for example, right? Like you cannot go home and play with your computer and whip out this essay in 30 seconds. Or, okay, let's have the AI version, show it to me. Now you move on from that. You know, or you write your version, show me your version, and then you used AI to edit it. I want to see both versions. Now, as a professor, I'm thinking, my God, that's a lot more work. So I already read like 15 stories a week. It's like, now I have to read this version and this version. So as a professor, it's like, no, you know, pay me more. But they're, you know, we're all, just like with the pandemic, we're all having to be creative instantly. Like, now what do we do? You know.
Yeah.
But for me, with the writers I work, they love creativity. So they're you know, don't want to touch it really. So, but I'm thinking about the kids, you know, the other professors with essays and all this other work that it just is like you're trying to get through the semester. So have AI do it, you know, ChaptGPT in 30 seconds. Okay, I'm done, moving on. But so you're right, there's other programs where you can run the product through the essay and like, was it AI generated? But I'm sure kids will find a way around it. Like go through it and make, you know, 5 errors. It's like, okay, it's more human now because there's mistakes, you know. So, and one Stanford professor is like, it's just a better essay. So like I said, they know when AI does it. But now the kids know that. It's like, okay, I got to make it a little worse.
Yeah.
It's just back and forth, right? Back and forth.
One more question. Yeah, we have time for one more.
Sure, yeah. I mean, these models are, the larger models are really interesting. Amazon published about one of their customers building one model. It was $65 million. It took 3 months running on a large cluster. The carbon footprint for that is enormous. The carbon footprint for that would be like the lifetime of many automobiles for just like one model. And the reality is that when you're using these, you'll probably take a model off the shelf but then do some fine tuning. So what I want to say is that there is a lot of energy being poured into this, also into crypto. And you know, there are these rationalizations for both of them. And frankly, it's a lot of the same players who are really doing the justification work. They're invested in both. And so I think that, you know, lately there's been a lot more regulatory or compliance concerns about energy requirements, and a lot more publishing for like research papers. What was the footprint on this? You're not going to get funding if you go over a certain ratio, that kind of thing. We really have to call it into question. But again, there's a very libertarian thread amongst the billionaires funding things to say, oh, let's just skip all that.
Yeah, the other thing is water. They have to stay cool. So like it's using, in Arizona, I just got a report today, just massive amounts of water. And just, you know, we don't have water in the desert. You know, Arizona has had this major drought. And the other piece is labor. So like I said, like one job for writers is to look at the output and retrain the model. Well, no one talks about the people that are paid $1 a day or less in Kenya to retrain the models. So we're kind of using slave labor to improve the models. Right. Like that's, if you get into the underbelly of it, it's like, okay, massive water, you know, massive energy, human labor at, you know, pennies to make it better.
It doesn't have to be that way. It's just that the majors who've done the real outliers and high profile ones, that's what they're doing. There are definitely others who are doing very notable work, very competitive work, much, much less energy input. There are ways around it. But again, it's kind of a marketing thing.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so I think we're at time, but I wanted to just ask the panelists if they could tell us what you're reading or watching, following, as it relates to AI that others might be interested in knowing about. So Nisha, we'll start with you and continue on.
Yeah, I have a list. So certain things that you may all access. So LinkedIn Learning has a lot of different resources on there. Society for Human Resource Management has free webinars, and they're pretty big in making sure that it's often that they have courses in there and it's in there. So Lattice is one. Beware of their spam though. they will spam you. One from like the diversity, equity, inclusion space, there's ChaptGPT, which then takes in account our cultural like experience. You can just look it up on LinkedIn. I follow her, a Black woman, and yeah, that one's really good. Otter has been very helpful for me just playing around in my meetings. So then that way, I'm someone who I have to listen, but I also have to like write it out just for like my own feeling of comfort. But Otter allows me to essentially like record all the screens that are impactful, take in the voices that may be highlighted. So if you're someone like me, that may be helpful. Been playing around with like Copilot because it's on our normal computer, and then Udemy was a resource as well. And then another free one is Mineral. And that one has been very helpful in the people space.
Thanks. Nina.
My list is not long. There's a great Substack. It's called lastweekinai.substack.com. And every week it kind of sends it out. And these are the new developments. So it's like what's happening at the business level, at the environmental level, lawsuit level, and it's just kind of a roundup. So I glance at that, like anything headline-wise that is interesting to me as a writer, as someone who cares about the environment. So that's the one. I have a friend, Jason, who runs Pulse of AI. If you're interested in like what businesses, little businesses, not the big guys, what are they busy doing with AI? And there's a lot of hybrid work that you mentioned. So there's a podcast, Pulse of AI.
I think Last Week also has a podcast as well. Yeah. Paco?
So one thing is Ben Lorica, former UC prof, also former lead of the data practice, editorial practice at O'Reilly. Ben Lorica has a very popular podcast called The Data Exchange. And I join Ben every month. We do a recap on like latest happening in AI. Ben is also chair for one of the premier conferences is here in San Francisco. It's called the AI Conference, appropriately enough. And I'll be MC for that. That's coming up in September. So if you do want to get around some of the conference space and find out what's going on in technology, I can definitely give some suggestions there. Another one that I really like for practice is called MLOps.community. And it's very diverse. It's all over the world, very much volunteer, but thousands and thousands of people. And it's a mix of like data engineers, machine learning engineers, product managers, et cetera, people from a lot of different kinds of roles who are trying to understand how is this all changing. And we just did a conference recently, AI in production. We had 30% women at the conference, which was kind of like astounding, but we worked hard at it. Yeah. But we had like 80 speakers and all volunteers. So things like that are going on. I think I love language, so I really love John McWhorter's, God, now I'm blanking on the podcast name, but I'll come up with it. But look at John McWhorter's
Glenn
linguistics
McGowery.
podcast. Exactly. Lexicon Valley. Thank you. And the other thing is just there's a community called Hugging Face, which really supports kind of the opposite of the tech majors. They're out of France, and they really support like an open source ecosystem. So they look for where there are a lot of small companies trying to work together, what's the friction, how can we help? And it's a large community, and if you go to Hugging Face, there's great reading lists, like daily papers to check out. They're usually a pretty good voice. IBM has aligned very closely with them, and others as well. So yeah, definitely if you want more tips, I'll be very happy to.
Let's thank our panelists. Thank you, everyone. you.